Welcome to Muskegon Rising, a community service project of the Muskegon Rotary Club. Our purpose is to create lasting positive change. We've been doing that here since 1916. So, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Gabe Gerlach, Muskegon YMCA CEO and fellow Rotarian. Welcome to this wonderful podcast. We've got the lovely CEO of Pioneer Resources, Jill Bonthuis, with us today. And we're very excited to hear all about Pioneer Resources, which is a really wonderful organization in Muskegon that does a lot. So we're going to learn about that today. So thanks for coming on, Jill.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I was hoping we could start with you kind of just sharing an overview of Pioneer Resources, all of the many things that you do, your kind of targets of who you're trying to serve, and then where that service kind of is here in Muskegon.
Love to. I love talking about our history because this year we'll actually be celebrating 70 years as a corporation, but 80 years providing community services. So it really started in the 1940s. Pioneer Resources was actually the first special education school in Muskegon called Pioneer School. And then as special education became funded throughout the United States, we looked at what are those unmet needs. And so today we provide services to individuals with disabilities and seniors, expanding service areas, and we always say use your four fingers. So you're a place to live, a place to learn, a place to grow and play, and a way to get there. And that kind of really encompasses all of our broad aspects of services.
I love that. Happy birthday to Pioneer Resources.
Right.
That's really exciting. It
is
a long history, and I think that speaks to the work that you do, the work that you've done. And anytime you see a long-standing organization like that, you can just tell that they really have an impact, and they're good at what they do.
Yeah, and it's hard because most people just see our moving billboards going down the road. So those 80-plus vehicles that we have providing transportation in Muskegon and Ottawa County, but really, we're so much more.
Oh, I love that. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that Camp Pendaluan, which is our camp, is the neighbor of Pioneer Trails.
It's so nice that we can partner in that way. And that's the great thing about Muskegon. I have found over and over are the collaborations. You know, there aren't competitors in our service areas. We're really just collaborators.
I love that. And they are truly the very best neighbors.
Thank
Carl
you.
and the pontoon boat rides, it's pretty fun. Every spring we get to go out on one and share lifeguards and all those kind of things.
But it works out great.
Like you said, right? It's just a way to serve more and do better.
Right. Because we're both doing good work. So why not work together to do that?
So it's quite the little camp hub there. We've got the Boy Scouts and all that as well.
Beautiful part of the lake, too.
It is. Kind of, keep that secret.
That's right. No houses there, just camps.
All right. Can you tell us about your journey to becoming CEO of Pioneer Resources? How, your leadership style has influenced the organization's ability to serve and strengthen the Muskegon community? 'Cause you're kind of a big deal.
Oh. Well, I've been with the organization for 8+ years. So really how it started was I was a community partner. I was working for Health West, our community mental CMH system that really referred people to service providers. And actually one of the parents of the persons on my caseload said, the longtime director at Pioneer, Greg Scott, is retiring. Have you ever thought about putting in for that position? And I thought, well, I had, but he goes, I really encourage you to do it. So I did. And throughout the process, there were multiple interviews and engagement with the leadership staff at the time. And it was a great interview process where the board was very engaged, and I was thrilled to be appointed the new CEO. So that has been 8+ years ago. And working with the leadership team that we have, so we have directors, we have managers, we have supervisors, and then we have all of our hourly staff who are really doing that critical, important work one-on-one with the clients that they serve. And it works beautifully because I feel like I can develop kind of those visions. I can work with the community and see what those needs are and think, okay, how can we fund that? How can we gather grants to do that? How can we find other collaborators to do that? And together, we just make the work happen. Sounds a lot easier than what it is sometimes, especially the funding part.
That's fair. I feel like you're also, as a female leader too, you were one of the first people when I took on my position that I reached out to just to connect with and learn from you and, as a, kind of a mentor role, like, okay, what do you recommend I do? How should I get started? Who should I be connecting with? Because we had a bit of a relationship before that, but I feel like you do that a lot with young leaders or developing leaders, and I think that's pretty special.
I love to mentor. And I think it's such a critical piece that we have to remember in any leadership role, because you're never done learning. You're never done looking at how do I need to adapt or change my style of leadership to meet the needs of those that I'm working with currently. So I am a huge proponent of mentorship. So I have a mentor myself, and I love to take the young people in our community and say, okay, what is it you want to do? And how can I help you get there? And whether it's just connecting them with others who they might want to get to know, who might be able to support their services that they're providing. But really, that's key. It's just those relationships and that connectivity.
I think that speaks to like you as a person and what you do with your organization, though, too, right? What did you focus on when you're talking about pioneers? We're good at these pieces. We can bring these things to the table. How can we partner with other spaces to use our talents and build something great? And I feel like that's what you do both as a leader, but also as an organization.
Yeah. And we have to evaluate it, because really, if there isn't, if it's something we've been doing for a long time and we see a need dissipating, we really have to have those collaborative communications with other providers doing the same thing and say, do we really all need to be continuing this if we're all struggling separately? Or should we look at it differently? And can we partner on different things? I think one of the biggest movements that we're seeing in business right now is it's hard to find strong support staff. So that financial professionals, the HR professionals, and looking at how can we, especially as nonprofits, partner together to share those staff and those resources and be able to provide that service. So we recently did that with Every Woman's Place and provided some financial services and oversight for them. And really, it helps in both ways, because it creates a stronger base of that workforce, but then it also provides that flexibility for those organizations to share that cost.
Absolutely. Overhead can be what can make or break some of those smaller nonprofit organizations. So really clever that you're able to. You're a larger organization, a larger nonprofit compared to, an Every Woman's Place or some of the smaller entities. So I love that. I think that's a great model, especially if you don't have necessarily an overhead parent or national entity that can help support
that. Right.
Yeah. All right. So Pioneer Resources is a well-respected organization in Muskegon. What do you believe sets your team and programs apart as a leader in addressing the needs of individuals with disabilities and seniors?
I think it's that ongoing history and commitment. So understanding that every family's needs look different and every individual's needs look different. And we continually talk about how we don't want to focus on fitting people into squares, but rather let's create the shapes and the services that they need. And that's really hard to do because it can be very complex and look so different for each person. But we're continually having those conversations about how can we be innovative with that. Just because it's always been done this way doesn't mean we need to continue doing it that same way. We may need to adapt and modify and change those services too.
Do you have an example of that you're really proud of or like to, use as an example of how you can take that and then extrapolate the concepts for other potential?
Yeah. I think one of those examples that we look at historically is in residential settings. So the state defines there are licensed adult foster care homes. And within that adult foster care home, there's a lot of regulations. So the person can't pass their own medications. A staff has to do it for them. A staff has to be there 24 hours a day. So if we're looking at a person who's lived their entire life with 24-hour staff, someone setting up their medication, delivering their medication, that's a barrier to them moving on into independence because they don't have the opportunity to try it themselves. So we looked at unlicensing a home and just providing a setting where it's unlicensed, but we could provide the staff when the person needed it. So really, it's called a supported independent living. And in doing that, we can create a space that is really individualized to that person and their needs. So they can learn how to set up their own medication, create their own menu plans, how to have that resource to contact if it's the middle of the night and they need something. So really using technology within that process to be able to create that was one of those key factors. So I think that is just kind of a good representation of an example of how do we need to think outside that box, that square service that's always been provided to meet someone's needs differently.
Absolutely. It's skill building.
Yeah.
Life skill building.
Yep.
That's wonderful. Do you use technology? Do you find that you use it more in your programming?
So we're beginning to. I think certainly that is a movement that you're seeing across the nation. So I am a CARF surveyor, so that's an accrediting body that serves organizations like ours across the United States and in multiple different countries. And we're really seeing that push to how technology can be utilized more to support persons. So whether it be a person with an intellectual and developmental disability or a senior, but perhaps that technology could be placed in their home to provide that individual one-on-one contact, but not have to have that individual one-on-one person in that space to be able to provide that. So it can look different in a lot of different ways, as well as kind of creating that safe environment, timers on stoves to make sure they're not left on, to medication reminders built into a system that will deliver that medication at a certain time, too.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's exciting to think that there are lots of good uses for that, because I think sometimes there's a lot of fear associated with technology, right or wrong. And
Right.
So how do you embrace it and find the good in it, or how it can be used as a tool correctly?
Yeah, definitely. I think for us, it's always looking at how can we be innovative, and the employees that work with us have to be ready to be change agents, because certainly, again, we can't operate the same way we were when the community's needs are changing. So being innovative, being fact finders, being always seeking out what is new and what is a different way that we could provide it. And most certainly, how are we going to fund it? Because Medicaid, Medicare funding has been pretty stagnant over the last couple of years, and the only funding that they've provided is increases to wages, which are certainly needed. Our direct care workers are not paid high enough for the jobs that they do, the critically important jobs of passing medications, taking care of persons' personal care needs, everything from providing assistance to a person's feeding tube, to stomas, to oxygen. We need to be able to look at that differently within our state and see differently how that could be funded to be able to meet a person's need.
Sure. Is there advocacy work? I guess I should assume. I'm sure there's advocacy work being done. What are the focuses of those right now? Or
so really that focus is the money following the person and being able to accurately fund the service. So I would say about 70% of our services that are funded by Medicaid, the Medicaid funding does not cover the service cost. So there is that gap, and that gap is then funded by our organization. So we're seeking grants, community, donors to be able to support that through many ways. And, a lot of energy can go into doing that type of work instead of really focusing on the services. So at times we're struggling with that thought of mission versus margin and how we're going to continue to support those needs.
Absolutely. I'm sure that there's a necessity to have diverse revenue streams and to make sure that you can fill that gap with ease so you can focus on the things that are
to meet
important.
Those needs, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because the needs aren't necessarily dissipating in the community. They might just look different.
No, absolutely. How do you ensure that Pioneer Resources stays connected to the Muskegon community and adapts to those needs that you're talking about?
Because it's so important, because if we aren't out there hearing those needs, then we could be losing on finding out what that greatest need is. So a couple different ways we do that. So we ask all of our leadership team to be on some community committee or board or engage. Certainly membership in Rotary, membership in the chamber, assuring that they are out serving in that way so that they can also represent who we are and what we do and how we might be able to partner on that, but then also bringing back those discussions of what are those needs. Continually looking at a strategic process. So our strategic plans are very short term, again, so that we can be more nimble to be able to meet those needs and plan effectively around those needs.
Oh, that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
a clever strategy for the way that you want to do things.
Yeah. And it's truly a commitment to the community that way, too. I think anytime we can have the opportunity to speak to community groups, it's also to present about what we do, but then it's also that listening session of what else are those needs and how can we meet those needs.
Yeah, identifying the gaps and saying, oh, you know what? That's a gap that I think we can help with.
Right. And if we can't, what other community partner could?
Yeah, or I know someone, or, this group might be perfect to do this piece.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I like that. Muskegon faces some unique challenges and opportunities here. How does Pioneer Resources work contribute to the overall health, inclusion, and growth of this community?
So we're really focusing on a couple different areas, and one that comes to mind is when we talk about transportation. Transportation is such a critical service that often we forget how critically important it is in encompassing all of those other social determinants of health. So when we're talking about people having access to food, access to healthy food, access to medical appointments, access to just recreational opportunities, and if you don't have a way to get there, that is a barrier. Employment. If a person can't get to that employment, they can't fulfill their responsibilities. And it really is kind of a capture where a person gets stuck in that cyclical circle of if you don't have transportation, you can't get that job. If you don't have a job, you can't get insurance. If you don't have insurance, you can't get quality medical care. And so really to try and figure that out, we're working alongside Access Health to kind of build that formulary to say, how might transportation fit into this resource that we could offer? But also looking at what are other organizations doing and utilizing and what is that remaining need. So some of the additional services that we've started providing for transportation are transportation for individuals diagnosed with substance use disorders. So providing transportation to treatment, to therapy, to successful medication-assisted therapy. And if that's on a daily basis, we're making sure we're getting there on a daily basis.
That's great. And do you see that as being kind of the I don't know if the next big thing, but like the next focus area for Pioneer Resources, that transportation and shoring things up, particularly in our community?
Yeah, I think there's two areas that we're seeing growth in our community. So certainly it is that need for transportation. And then also the vocational realm, so preparing people for employment, all the way from our pre-ETS programs that are working with teenagers and young adults through the high school system, as well as our vocational job coaches who can walk alongside someone and help support them through all of those transitions in employment, but also educating employers on how they could be better partners working with a person who may have a disability, who could be a really quality employee for them, because we're all seeking great employees.
Absolutely. It's a huge need in the community. And I know there's a lot being done at Muskegon Public and that piece too, with some new vocational, with your high school students. And I'm hoping that is extrapolated to
right.
Other school systems in the ISD and that piece, so we can continue to look at building, I don't know, it sounds a little clinical, but like the streams of workforce.
Exactly.
that we need.
I mean, we're so lucky to have a great school system and to have the Career Tech Center. I encourage other employers to have an intern from the Career Tech Center serving as part of their school curriculum, but also serving within your organization. We had one from their computer technology program work with us last year, and it was a great experience for both partners. So looking at, again, how can we partner with others in the community to make a successful fit for both of us?
That's great. Now, if somebody, is really impassioned about doing or being a part of the work that Pioneer Resources does, how can they get involved, or what do you recommend their call to action would be?
Yeah. So certainly go to our website first, continue to learn more about it, get a hold of us. We love to give tours and really go a little bit more in depth and explain the service areas that we have. We need employees as well. So people who are dedicated to people, you're making meaningful differences in a person's life. And that paid position could look anywhere from working in a residential group home to driving that bus. Many of our employees in our transportation department are actually retired from their full-time employment. It works out great. They can come in and work a short route in the morning. In the summer, they have a great time to go tee off on the golf course and come back and do an afternoon route. So I encourage that to be looked at as not just a second part of employment. It's certainly giving you additional income and a retirement plan, but look at it as an opportunity to help other people. And when you're working with seniors, if we have a senior driver driving for the PACE Life Circles transportation program, they're helping their peers. So I think that is unique in that way. And then we're always looking for volunteers. So board members, people that would like to join committees. We have a DEI committee in our community, so we invite any organization to join that. And really that discussion is looking at how are persons with disabilities falling under that umbrella of DEI focus in our community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of ways that we can get involved.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to share or plug on behalf of Pioneer Resources, or that we should look at more or know about the organization?
Well, of course, I think springtime brings for us a wonderful event called the Hats and Horses event. So it's always the first Saturday in May. We have the Derby playing live at that event. And really that event is focused on raising funds for Pioneer Trails Camp. So having the opportunity for people to attend our camp where they're going to find paved trails to provide accessibility, renovations to the restroom are happening right now to ensure even more accessibility in that restroom. But just for persons to come in and be able to enjoy the outdoors. We know how important that is for people who may not have that opportunity otherwise. So I encourage sponsorship of our event or people to attend our event. Be watching for that to come out on our website soon.
That's wonderful. And again, I can speak to it's a beautiful facility. There's nowhere better to spend a morning, afternoon, a week than on beautiful Big Blue Lake.
That is so true.
And you're right. Accessibility to the outdoors is there's a lot of barriers there, depending on where you're located in that piece.
Right. So, even a person that uses a wheelchair or a walker can have that access to go on that pontoon boat ride and enjoy the wind blowing through their face out on the lake.
Go look at all the little turtles in Turtle Bay. See the eagle's nest.
That's right. It's just beautiful.
Well, I love that you can do that. So everybody should come to Hats
and Horses.
Hats and Horses, the first Saturday in May.
Yep.
So please sponsor and find ways to give back to Pioneer Resources. Thanks for coming on, Jill.
Thanks for having me.